Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopichana Vallabha Girivaradhari Sodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Asatar Sata Shri Srimada's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Is there a book? Or
just now coming. Eight, you got 8.
thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 4, the characteristics of Rsabhadeva, text 8. So,
Yeah.
Dravida Prabhu, how do you handle
I
the...
usually chant the prose. And then
just-
you read, and then you read word by word.
Okay. So we don't repeat.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Ataha Bhagavan Rshabhadevaha Swavarsham Karma Chetamanumanyamanaha Padarshita Gurukula Vaso Labda Varaya Gurubir Anugyato Vihamedinam Dharman Anushikshamano Jayantyam Indra Dattayam Ubiyalakshanam Karma Samamnayam Natam Abhiyunjan Atmajanam Atmasamananam Shatam Janayamasa.
Not
Word by word.
Okay. Ata, thereupon, after the departure of his father. Ha, indeed, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rshabhadevaha, Rshabhadev. Sa, his own. Varsham, kingdom. Karma Chetram, the field of activities. Anumanyamanaha, accepting as. Pradarshita, shows as an example. Gurukula Vasaha, lived at the Gurukula. Labda, having achieved. Varahai, gifts. Guru Bihi, by the spiritual master. Anugyata, being ordered. Grihamedinam, of the householders. Dharman, duties. Anusikshimanaha, teaching by example. Jayantyam, and his wife Jayanti. Indra, let's see, what is that? Indra Datayam, offered by Lord Indra. Ubhayalakshanam, of both types. Karma, activities. Samanayam, samamnayam, natam, mentioned in the scriptures. Abhiyujan, performing. Atmajanam, sons. Atmasamananam, exactly like himself. Shatam, 100. Janayamasa, begot. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. After Nabi Maharaj departed for Badarik Ashrama, the Supreme Lord, Rshabhadeva, understood that his kingdom was his field of activities. He therefore showed himself as an example and taught the duties of a householder by first accepting brahmacharya under the direction of spiritual masters. He also went to live at the spiritual master's place, Gurukula. After his education was finished, he gave gifts, Guru Dakshin, to his spiritual masters, and then accepted the life of a householder. He took a wife named Jayanti, and he begot 100 sons, who were as powerful and qualified as he himself. His wife Jayanti had been offered to him by Indra, the king of heaven. Rsabhadeva and Jayanti performed householder life in an exemplary way, carrying out ritualistic activities ordained by the Shruti and Smriti Shastra. Purport. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rsabhadeva had nothing to do with material affairs. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Pirichanaya sadhunam vinashaya duskritam, the purpose of an incarnation is to liberate his devotees and stop the demoniac activities of non-devotees. These are the two functions of the Supreme Lord when his incarnation, when he incarnates. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that in order to preach, one must live a practical life and show people how to do things. Apani achari bhakta shikai mu sabare. One cannot teach others unless he behaves the same way himself. Rsabhadeva was an ideal king, and he took his education in the Gurukula, although he was already educated because the Supreme Lord is omniscient. Although Rsabhadeva had nothing to learn from Gurukula, he went there just to teach the people in general how to take an education from the right source, from Vedic teachers. He then entered householder life and lived according to the principles of Vedic knowledge, Shruti and Smriti. In his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2-10, Srila Rupa Goswami, quoting the Skanda Purana, states, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidim Vina Akantiki Harer Bhaktir Upatyaya Vikalpate. Human society must follow the instructions received from the Shruti and Smriti Vedic literature. Practically applied in life, this is worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to the Pancharatriki Vidhi. Every human being must advance his spiritual life, and at the end, return home back to Godhead. Maharaj Rsabhadeva strictly followed all these principles. He remained an ideal grihastha and taught his sons how to become perfect in spiritual life. These are some examples of how he ruled the earth and completed his mission as an incarnation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Rsabhadeva is an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's stated here he had 100 sons. So 10 of these sons were Kshatriyas. They, and one of them especially, the eldest, Bharata, was a Kshatriya. And he ruled the kingdom after Rsabhadeva became an avadut. So there were 9 other sons who were Bhagavats, devotees. And then the other 81 sons were Brahmins. They were Brahmanins. So this just shows that birth doesn't determine one's varna, because some of the sons were devotees, some were ordinary Brahmins, some were Kshatriyas, and one became the emperor of the earth, Bharata. And Chaturvarnyam maya shrista guna karma vibhagashaha. Krishna explains in the Gita that I've created this whole system of varnas and ashramas, but one's position is not by birth, it's by one's guna, one's quality, and karma, the nature of one's work. So he had sons who were devotees, sons who were Brahmins, sons who were Kshatriyas. And actually this planet became known as Bharatavarsha because of his son Maharaj Bharata. Before that, this place was known as Nabhivarsha, after the name of his father, King Nabhi. And Nabhi was the son of one of the sons of Maharaj Agnidra, who was married, took as a wife an Apsara. He performed austerities and got his he performed austerities to satisfy Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma agreed to give him a wife, one of the Apsaras, Purvachiti, I think her name was. And they had 9 sons, and one of them was Nabhi, and the others were Kimpurusha, Harivarsha, Ilavrita, Ramyaka, Hiranmaya, Kuru, Bhadrashva, and Ketumala. So for those who know a little bit about the geography of Bhumandala, that's given later in this canto of the Bhagavatam, they'll recognize the names of those sons of Agnidra as the names of the different Varshas. As I said, there's 9 Varshas in Jambudweep, which is the central island in Bhumandala. And in the center of it, there's this mountain, Meru. So it's kind of interesting that the 9 sons of Agnidra, who was Rsabhadeva's grandfather, married 9 daughters of Meru Devi. So then there's Mount Meru, there's the different, so there's personality connected with everything in the Vedic cosmos. It's quite interesting. So Rsabhadeva, he was providing a perfect example of how to be a proper ruler of a kingdom. And the first thing he did is he went to Gurukula, like Krishna did the same thing. Of course, Krishna first appeared in Mathura as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, and he was transferred to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nanda and Yashoda. But then, one fine day, Akrura comes from Mathura to take him back for a lot of different reasons, but one of them was to become reacquainted with Devaki and Vasudeva, who, after he killed Kamsa, wanted to send him to Gurukula. So he went to Gurukula because in that realm he was considered to be of the Kshatriya Varna. So he went to the ashram of Sandipani Muni, which is near what is that name of that? Ujjain. Yeah, Ujjain. So a few years ago I went there and they took us to the place where Sandipani Muni's ashram was, where Krishna went to Gurukula. Krishna and Balaram went to Gurukula. And the same thing happened. They got instruction from their gurus. They gave some guru dakshin, and they went and married, became householders. So Rshabhadeva went through that system. It's the perfect Vedic life sequence for a man. The man, if he's part of the twice born, the Dvijas, a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, or a Vaishya, go to the Gurukula and take instruction in spiritual life in general and in things related to their particular Varna. And then they go and they enter householder life and they perform their duties responsibly according to the directions of the Shrutis and the Smritis, the different categories of Vedic literature. And that's extremely important. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, Yashastra vidyam utsraja varte karma karata nasadim abapnoti nasukam na param gatim, that those who give up the instructions of Shastra and act according to their own whims, they don't achieve perfection, they don't achieve the ultimate goal, they're not going to be happy. And you can see it all around us. I mean, this is like a little island of peacefulness and satisfaction and happiness, I dare say, in the midst of a Kali Yuga civilization. So Rshabhadeva taught by example, it's stated here. And later on, he goes on to give some teaching, some instruction to his sons, because he's planning on retiring, so he wants to give his son some instructions. And there's his instructions include some of the most famous verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, very often quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Nayam deho deo bhajam niroke kashtan karman arhatam vidbhujam ye. Tapodivyam puchka yena satvam shurdedyasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. Thank you for the prompt. Got stuck there for a second. That means now that we have this human form of life, it's almost like the Vedanta Sutra says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now that we have this human form of life, we shouldn't use it for pursuing the same kinds of pleasures that are sought by the animals, like the hogs and the dogs, and they're called stool eaters, vidbhujam. Rather, one should engage in tapodivyam, divine austerities, meant to help us advance in spiritual life, so that we can taste Brahma Saukyam Tvanantam, unlimited spiritual happiness and pleasure in the soul's eternal relationship with Krishna. And another famous verse from the teachings of Rsabhadeva, Pumsastriya Mituni, Pumsastriya Matuni Bhavametam, Tayarmito Hridya Granta Mahu, Ato Griya Cheta Sutapta Vitaya, Janasya Mahoya Mahamameti. Means there's a tendency for the male and the female, the man and the woman, to become attracted to each other. And when that attraction develops, it's like a tight knot in the heart. And because of that tight knot, one becomes very much, one becomes very much concerned with accumulating wealth, having a home, having some proper occupation, dealing with relatives, and dealing with social and political situations. One can become very, very much absorbed in such things. And one becomes absorbed in thinking in terms of I and mine. And this mentality ultimately has to be transcended. And Krishna gives a way to do that. If one enters householder life with the idea that it's a yajna, vivaha yajna, it's a sacrifice that's being performed for the pleasure and satisfaction of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. It's being done for His pleasure. And so many householder devotees, great ones like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, demonstrated how one can live in that condition and still satisfy Lord Krishna. Like Rsabhadeva was also teaching by example that he was a householder, he had his wife, he was a king, he was dealing with all kinds of situations, but he remained detached. And after giving instruction to his sons, he became Avaduta. He just gave up his position. He began externally appearing like a madman or some crazy person. It's not very much recommended these days to do that, but we've got a few. But he eventually left his body. So this is what the example given by these great personalities, that they perform their duty, and at a certain time they become renounced. They enter the Vanaprastha ashram or the sannyas ashram. So that is somebody leaving their body, I guess. One of the wonderful sounds of Grand Avenue. So those were some points I wanted to make. Does anybody have any comments or questions or anything to add? Dravida Peru.
Well, we're going to be reading about it as time goes on with this story of Rsabhadeva. But one of the things that's most amazing to me about Rsabhadeva, Lord Rsabhadeva, is that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and yet he took such a humble position. I mean, he was just traveling around and people would insult him and, spit on him, and even worse.
Yeah.
And yet he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah. Anyway, and I don't know, it's unique. There's so many incarnations described, but nobody has taken that kind of position where he's shown such indifference to, as even normal moral interactions with other people. I just wanted to make that comment. We're going to be hearing.
No, but when you're ready.
No, I'm ready.
So, you mentioned that it's not something we should do. So how this avadut, but I've had devotees that are, quite spontaneous and don't follow all the rules and can be quite unkempt and completely oblivious to social order. So and they've actually presented themselves as Babajis or on some higher level. So how do we measure authenticity against just craziness or covered arrogance? You follow me?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I've met from time to time some individuals like that. And I guess you just have to have judgment. Krishna has to let you know within the heart that this person is a sincere, I don't know what the word is, but is genuine, a genuine soul, because one sign was, is he the one who had the stool that perfumed the area? So so there are some signs.
Some indication.
who's genuine and who isn't. But yeah, we have to think about all of us. Yeah, are we genuine, or are we like the Afghani army? We've been trained, we've been coached, we've been given everything, but when Maya comes knocking, we're gone. You know, so avadutas or not, I think we've all got to check ourselves. And that's one of the good things about the association of devotees. They generally let one know that if one is behaving in a way that's not completely genuine.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. I have a question about Bhumandala. Bhumandala is a series of planets on the same level of the Earth planet. I mean, when they say an island, Prabhupada described island as planet because they are floating in the cosmos, in the mid-air. So, is there any scientific, cosmologists who have, since are they in our own solar system, can be seen by a telescope? Also, I have this curiosity to know actually what is the Bhumandala and where they are.
Yeah, well, Bhumandala, we have to kind of separate. We can't think of it in terms of the astronomy and the solar system and everything that we learned in school and see on television or in the museums. We kind of have to set that aside. Bhumandala was described by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. And what he told them says, this is what I've heard from those who have seen. In other words, it's something that's not really accessible to ordinary human sense perception. That's why it had to be spoken, by Shukadeva. He says, I'm telling you, Maharaj Parikshit, what I've heard, and this is what I've heard. So he has to give that description. I mean, if these things were visible to scientists and ordinary people, what would be the need for information about it to be included in the Bhagavatam? I mean, if it's something we can all see or should be able to see, then I don't think the information would have to be given. But Bhumandala is kind of like there's this central island, Jambudweep, and it's divided into 9 varshas. And in the center there's Mount Meru. And our Earth, which is sometimes was originally called Bharatvarsha, is one of those 9 sections. And it's not described as a globe. So this is challenging. It's described as part of an island, a mandala, Jambudweep. Now, as far as telescopes are concerned, yeah.
But I get, if it's not round like a ball, and I'm not challenging at all.
Yeah.
and I'm willing to accept interdimensional and multidimensional. And if I turn on a radio, I can pick up. There's all kinds of things flying around in this room that I don't see. If I have the right device, I can see it. I can shop on Amazon on my phone, but all that's flying through here. But I can get in a plane.
Yes.
And I can go from New York City. I can fly around the earth and come back to New York City. That would indicate a circle, a round globe. But you're saying, there's the plain of Jambudvipa, and there's 9 varsas, and the earth is one of those sections of that flat plain.
In terms of,
Now I accept that I'm trying to put multi-dimension in my little 3-dimensional brain, so fine, I can accept that.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. They may not be comparable. They're, we have an idea of the earth as a globe, but in the Vedic Shastras, there's 2 categories that deal with these questions. One is the Puranas, the other is the astronomical Siddhantas. And the astronomical Siddhantas, like the Surya Siddhanta, which Srila Prabhupada considered to be a bona fide Shastra, and it was translated from Sanskrit into Bengali by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That depicts the earth as a globe, about the same size as scientists say our earth is today.
That's reassuring.
Yes. And then the Bhagavatam describes a different picture, Bhumandala. So it's, if you go through the history of, the commentaries on the Bhagavatam, back 500 or 600 years, something like that, there were commentators on the Bhagavatam who were noticing this different presentation of Bhumandala and the astronomical Siddhantas. So, dealing with that apparent contradiction has always been a puzzle for the Vaishnavas.
May I ask something?
Yeah.
I hear that the description of the Bhumandala, as described in the 5th canto, is a description how the demigods see it from their abodes, not in our limited way of seeing things from Earth planet, but
Yes.
the way they see it from their plane of view, they see it the way it is described there.
Yes. That's one way to resolve the apparent contradiction.
Like, how would an ant describe this room?
Well,
In other words, I'm agreeing,
Yeah.
we see it one way, a whole different way, and the ant sees it a different way.
or even in terms of computers. I used to be here with Sadaputta in this community for some time. And he had the ability, he knew machine language, he knew how computers work. Not like, once we were trying to put together some videos, and we wanted to have a ball spinning, and he just, not using any software package or anything, he just types a few things into the computer in BASIC or something, and on the screen appears a red ball, rotating. How do you do that? How do you do that? But so this is the point. For the average person, okay, they see the red ball on the screen going around. The computer programmer, he could just see he could just see the lines of code. And I say, oh, that's a red ball spinning. And then in terms of the computer itself, that red ball spinning is in the processor, or it's just like a few pluses and minuses, zeros and ones. But if you know that language, you could see the sequence of zeros and ones, say, oh, that's a red ball spinning. So what is it? Is it what's going on in the processor? Is it the computer language? Is it the image on the screen? They're all the same if you know either the coding, or about how the chip operates in the computer, that little silicon chip. And then Maharaj was talking about what they see through the telescope. Depends on what kind of telescope that you have. Because, say, like, somebody may be using an optical telescope, and another astronomer may be using what's called an X-ray telescope that can detect sources of X-rays in outer space. So the astronomer with the optical telescope may be looking at a portion of the sky, sees nothing there. And then the astronomer using the X-ray telescope sees a massive source of X-rays, just emanating energy. And he tells the guy with the optical telescope, the scientist with the optical, hey, look at that. Wow, that's really, there's an amazing source of X-rays that's emanating all this energy. And he said, I don't see it. And the other astronomer said, well, of course you don't see it. You have to look at the optical telescope. No. If I can't see it in my telescope, it doesn't exist.
This actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, you can get images. I've seen them. I use an example in some of my presentations of an area of the sky through an optic telescope that shows nothing, and then with the X-ray telescope, you see an image, a source of X-rays. So, but another thing, huh?
How do they square that? The two.
Well, there are celestial objects that are. Some of celestial objects emanate energy within the spectrum of visible light. Other objects are emitting energy that's outside, that spectrum.
That's their answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but another thing to keep in mind is that the beginning and the end of the 5th canto cosmology chapters, it's directly stated in the verses, spoken by Shukadev Goswami, that he's giving a description of a Virat Rupa, a universal form, and directly states it at the beginning and the end of those cosmology chapters. And universal forms of Krishna sometimes require special vision, like when Arjuna asked to see the universal form. Krishna says, well, I have to give you divine eyes, divine vision, then you'll be able to see it. And sometimes universal form is revealed directly, like to Arjuna to Mother Yashoda when she looked in Krishna's mouth. You know, you've been eating dirt. I heard you're eating dirt. Let me see. So she looked in, and then Krishna manifested his universal form. She got totally bewildered, you know. And then Krishna withdrew it, and she kind of returned to her normal, Krishna's my son, I've got to protect him kind of mood. So universal forms, they also contain some things that are normally visible to us and some things that aren't. You know, sun, moon, stars, we see. Bhumandala, Mount Meru, we don't see with our present vision.
Isn't also said that the Virat Rupa is more or less imaginary?
Yes, it is said like that. It sometimes is given as something that an impersonalist can meditate upon. But in his purports to some of the 5th canto verses, Srila Prabhupada said it's a temporary manifestation of the Lord. It's imaginary in the same sense that to identify with the body, to identify the soul with the body is imaginary. Sometimes it's said that the Virat Rupa is an external form of God, Krishna. So to identify that external form, Virat Rupa, as the actual personality of Godhead is imaginary. So it's imaginary in that sense. Not that the body doesn't exist or that
So imaginary is not the same as allegorical.
according to these
I'm agreeing with you.
purports, yeah. And Srila Prabhupada goes on to compare the Virat Rupa to the Archa Vigraha, the deity, the form of the deity, like Radha Giridhari. Okay, the form is of matter, you could say. You know, it's marble. But to think that that is the actual deity, that's a mistake. That's an imagination. You know, so he said the Archa Vigraha is like the Virat Rupa, or the Virat Rupa is like the Archa Vigraha. It's, in one sense, a temporary form and matter. But he said, actually, the Archa Vigraha and the Virat Rupa, they are identical to the original spiritual form of Krishna. So just like we can perceive Radha Giridhari as two marble statues, or we can appreciate them as an expansion of the original form of Krishna and behave like that and act like that towards it. So in the conclusion of the cosmology chapters of the 5th canto, Shukadeva Goswami says that a devotee, someone who's aspiring to be a devotee, a yati, you know, is the word used, one progressing on the path, one should meditate upon the Virat Rupa and the original form of Krishna after hearing of both. And by that process of appreciating the Virat Rupa as a form of of Krishna, you'll come to appreciate the original spiritual form. So it's you're going through the 5th canto, so you're eventually going to come to these verses again, and maybe you'll look at them in a different way.
You know Prabhupada's classic answer. I have a follow-up question I want to ask, but Prabhupada's classic answer is everywhere I walk it is, except for New Vrindavan, he said.
Yeah, that's okay. I think everybody heard my question.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. What do you think of some devotees who are making a campaign to preach that the earth is flat and we are being cheated by the NASA and those pictures of outer space of the earth being a globe and all this,
Well, what I really think is they have a right to do that. They're giving their interpretation of things. But even, you could say, our more standard views, we'll say, well, yes, there is an earth globe. It's described in the astronomical Siddhantas. And then there's Bhumandala and Mount Meru. And we give an interpretation. Well, one is how you see things through ordinary senses. Another is how you see things if you have the vision of the demigods. It's everybody's giving, as far as I can see, an interpretation, trying to understand these things. But then you have to account for certain things. If you want to say that the earth that is visible to us right now is part of the plane of Bhumandala as it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, you have to account for some differences. For example, according to the description in the Bhagavatam, if this is the plane of Bhumandala that we're on now, if we're on the island of Jambudweep, then where is the sun? The sun, according to that vision, is going around the boundary of one of the islands. It's on this mountain. I forget what the mountain's name is. It's going around the horizon, right? We don't see the sun moving like that. So, in the summer, I've been here to Pacific Beach, out in the beach. You can see the sun set. In summertime, the sun comes up in the west over the mountains. It goes directly over your head at noon. And then in the evening, it goes straight down, dunks into the ocean. So I've asked these people, they have a big problem with the movements of the sun, trying to explain how we are actually now on the plane of Bhumandala. Well, why isn't the sun going around in a circle like that? Why is it going bloop straight down into the ocean?
You've got to stand sideways.
Go to Sweden, they practically go
Yeah, in the Arctic Circle, it goes like that.
I have a follow-up. I don't know how much time we have here, but you gave the example that of the guy with the optic telescope, and then the person with the X-ray telescope.
Yeah.
So within the framework of accepted science. You have the guy with the optic pointing and not seeing anything. You have the guy with the X-ray seeing something. So I'm not optic not seeing, X-ray seeing. When you present in the same way, if you say in the same fashion, you're seeing one aspect of the world, of reality, and the Bhagavatam is describing another. Seen through the lens of your limited senses, you see A. Seen through the lens of the Bhagavatam, we see B. Just as with lens A we see this, and with lens telescope A we see this, and telescope B we see this. So if you accept that principle, you're materialistic, mechanistic scientist, if you accept that principle in your world, why isn't it also valid in our world of the two lenses, the sensual, limited, and the Bhagavatam? When you present, because I'm sure you've said this to them, when you say that, what is their response? Or have you said it?
The most difficult responses come from the devotees. The scientists are easy. It's like the devotees. It's the devotees who are the biggest skeptics. It's our own people who are the biggest skeptics.
So help me out with it. You can answer the scientists, and then you can answer for the devotees.
Yeah. Well, any kind of analogy that we use or metaphor that we use to try to clarify something is going to have limited utility. I use that particular example to make a simple point. If you want to dissect it further, it may not have the same utility. But just in general, this idea of different visions. For example, if I go to Vrindavan, I see hogs and dusty streets, and Rupa Goswami goes to Vrindavan, he might see more than's being revealed to me.
Well, there's Rupa Goswami showing Akbar how it's all Chintamani.
Yeah.
And Akbar being stunned and going back and writing about his diary.
Yeah. So, people may have different visions. Mm-hmm. But to get back to your point, I think everyone has a right. I think there's some pretty sincere devotees who are really trying to understand the Bhagavatam, and they're trying to put it together, but to do it, you have to account for things. Like they would say to us, well, yeah, you may say like that, but how does that fit in with the Bhagavatam, what the Bhagavatam says? And it doesn't mention this and that. So they also have their problems, so
What do you think about the men going to the moon? Has that really happened?
Favorite question. Comes up all the time. Personally, I don't know. Like Srila Prabhupada would often make this point. We don't know anything really very much. We just take what authorities tell us. Like, we don't have any real experience of the Earth being a globe. Whenever we look at it, it's like.
Well, I gave the example of the
plane.
airplane.
But there is also
Well,
proof.
that's different. That you have to make an assumption and draw an inference.
But there is a proof when Cristobal Columbus and other sailors they went all the way to the west and reached the east.
You think.
No, that actually happened. No,
Well-
they arrived in Indonesia.
Prabhupada said they're like,
They went to Chile
Bull.
and went on and arrived in Indonesia.
so you have a bull, it's attached to a post by a rope. So it can try to go, it'll just go around in a circle as far as the rope lets it go. Doesn't mean there's not a whole big world beyond that circle that it could go to, but it's tethered. So Srila Prabhupada would give that example. Like Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave the same airplane example to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just told him, you're prejudiced. Yeah.
About what?
About believing the fact that you get in an airplane and it goes in a certain direction and you arrive back at the same point. You know, that is
Well, Sariputta Prabhu tried to adjust those things by saying ultra-dimensional realms,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, me too. I mean,
but whatever it is, we have to understand if we're engaged on that level, we're giving an interpretation.
I think your answer is just as those who say you can make an argument that the world is flat when seen in a particular way. You can make an argument that the world is round when seen in a particular way, as he's explained. See? And you have Surya Siddhanta and you have the Bhakti example.
Yes. So
It's all the same position.
what we're left with is
Can't Hare Krishna go home.
chant Hare Krishna and go home. Just accept this, what Shukadeva Goswami, he's not saying this is what I've seen or this is what I've proved, saying this is what I've heard.
from whom?
From sages.
From higher authorities.
Who are they?
Ultimately, there's Krishna. Okay. Oh,
The anybody voice has a question?
Yeah, from Portugal. Vijay Prabhu from Portugal.
Huh?
Vijay Prabhu has a question from Portugal. He's asking if you
Our picture?
No, no. Portugal. It's late. It's too late.
Tell him, give Drutakarma's email.
okay.
All right.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.